Okay, new video for 2019. Just a year ago, I had shot a video called Top 10 Fougere Fragrances. And later on, towards the summer, I shot a update to that video with a few additional Fougere fragrances that I had received, I had purchased, I had somehow acquired, but that video never made it on air. So fast forward to today, 2019, I figured I'd go ahead and put together another Fougere fragrances video. Since I focus on top 20 lists on Saturdays, we're doing a top 20, but we're actually doing 22 Fougere fragrances. So if you like Fougere fragrances and you're curious to find out my 22 favorite Fougere fragrances, then why don't you stick around and we're going to tell you all about it. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian with Smelling Great Fragrance Reviews. And yes, I'm a big fan of Fougere fragrances. And if you still don't know what Fougere fragrances are, then I'm going to tell you what they are. So Fougere fragrances basically are fragrances that you typically feature lavender and geranium in the notes, and also feature oak moss and coumarin tonka bean in the base notes. Typically the lavender and the geranium are on the top notes. I've seen them in heart notes as well. And sometimes I've even seen them in the base notes, and typically the oak moss and the coumarin tonka bean is in the base notes. So what does Fougere mean? Fougere basically means fern in French. And back in the 1800s, late 1800s, Paul Parquet created a fragrance called Fougere Royale for Houbigant. I have it featured here in this video, and I've spoken about this fragrance multiple times. You know about it. But this is the 2010 version of that late 1800s edition of Fougere Royale, the very first Fougere fragrance. And basically, Paul Parquet was trying to create a scent of a fern that ferns never had. So basically, what these fragrances are inspired of, or are the original Fougere Royale, which was inspired to be a scent. If a fern had a smell, then that's what it would smell like. So a lot of these are very manly, masculine fragrances. Some of them are unisex targeted, but I typically associate these kind of fragrances with men. I grew up with them with my dad. He wore Brut so much, and we have some here that kind of sort of go in that Brut-like territory. And I just love the way Fougeres and barbershop-y fragrances smell. Typically, barbershop and Fougeres are very, very similar. In fact, they are very close. Some don't go into the barbershop-y direction as much, but most of them do. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with number one, and that number one is a new fragrance that I've recently picked up, and it's from a house called Exaltatum from the UK, London, and this is Pergola, this one right here, and this is a aromatic Fougere, but this one is a very unique Fougere. It's ultra green, ultra potent, and very, very masculine leaning to me. Well, actually, I shouldn't say masculine leaning. It's unisex, but a little masculine leaning. But it focuses on hyacinth, green notes, grass notes, petitgrain, lots of different notes. There's also galbanum here, vetiver, but it is like a green dream come true. Very, very unique Fougere. I've had people smell this one and they've been really, really, really curious and interested in it. They've wanted to wear it, but this is a brand new bottle here, and it's called Pergola from Exaltatum. Next up is Fougere Royale from Houbigant, and this is that first fragrance that was created in the late 1800s. This is the 2010 version because they brought it back and they recreated it for more modern noses, and I've been a fan of it since probably around 2013 when I first smelled it. And it's a classy masculine fragrance. Very green, of course. Lavender is big here, whereas in the last one, the hyacinth was a pretty big note, but it's very green. Here it's lavender. You've also got geranium, you've got green notes, you've got oak moss, and you also have that tonka bean. So it's ultra masculine. Although I don't think women should not be able to wear it, but I think it just kind of screams masculine to me. But very, very classy, masculine, barbershop-y Fougere style fragrance. Very, very classic too. I absolutely love it. So that's Fougere Royale. Next up, we're going to a house called Azzaro, and this is a classic that's been around since the late 70s. This is Azzaro pour Homme. Now this one is a very, very unique Fougere where you have those notes of like the lavender and the geranium and oak moss and tonka bean, but this one has that added touch of anise, the licorice note, which actually is really, really exciting. It is very classic, but I don't find it very old smelling to me. It doesn't smell like it used to back in the day, but I think it's pretty decent for what it is. I love it. I love it because that anise or licorice adds a unique twist to the fragrance, which makes it very, very unique. It's not anything like a typical current existing Fougere fragrance. It does have classic touches, but I think if you like those masculine fragrances, you should be into this one. So that is Azzaro pour Homme. Next, we're going to the House of Maison Margiela, and I did speak about this one recently in my rated or ranked Maison Margiela fragrances video, and this is at the Barbers. Now, this one actually very similarly to, actually I shouldn't say very similarly, this one kind of reminds me of YSL's Rive Gauche a little bit. And speaking of YSL's Rive Gauche, it's from the same parent company, L'Oreal, who owns both Maison Margiela and YSL. So I can see that they have some similarities. It is all about lavender, you've got musk, you've got basil, you've got rosemary, oak moss, leather, and of course there's some tonka bean for that actual real barbershop-y Fougere smelling fragrance. I actually really like it, and I love it for a Fougere, but when I ranked Maison Margiela, I actually had more interesting fragrances compared to this one, if that makes sense. So that's why this one ranked low, but I really, really love at the Barbers for a Fougere barbershop fragrance. So at the Barbers is another one. Next up, we're going to an indie house, and this is Gallagher Fragrances with Evergreen Dream. Now I have a review of this one, and I think it's a very, very intense, overwhelming Fougere barbershop fragrance, where this one kind of takes you into a green foresty kind of piney territory, but you still have the lavender, you still have the oak moss, you still have the tonka beans for the typical Fougere fragrance notes, but you also have some woody notes. You've got galbanum, lime, musk, a very, very intense Fougere experience. Evergreen Dream from Gallagher Fragrances is my second favorite fragrances from the house, and I also like Rose All Day from this house, which is really, really amazing to me. Next up, we're going to a house called Penhaligon's, and this is Sartorial. And Sartorial is a fragrance that reminds me of my dad. This really, really reminds me of a fragrance that my dad wore. In fact, it smells so classic, but it doesn't smell old. I mean, it smells very, very modern the way it's created, especially using the notes that Bertrand Duchaufour used to create this one. So you have lavender, but you have metallic notes. You've got beeswax, oak moss, aldehydes, leather, honey, woody notes, cardamom and amber and tonka beans. It's so good. It is really, really classy. Really, like, it smells like dad. Like, it really reminds me of my dad, and that's actually an awesome thing because I grew up smelling all my dad's fragrances, and this one especially just totally reminds me of him. Anyway, that is an awesome scent from Penhaligon's. If you don't know Sartorial, then you probably do not like Fougeres, but if you like Fougeres, definitely check this one out. Speaking of Penhaligon's, I have another Fougere fragrance from this house. In fact, there's 3 on this list, and this one dates back to the late 1800s. This is English Fern. It doesn't smell old, but it smells very, very classic to me. You've got lavender, you've got geranium, you've got oak moss, you've got cloves, patchouli, and sandalwood. Now, in the notes breakdown, the tonka bean is missing, but it doesn't dry, but it smells, I mean, it totally smells like a Fougere to me, but very, very classic. For me, the cloves are pretty dominant for some odd reason. And I think it matches perfectly with the lavender, cloves, geranium. They're kind of all very similarly spicy, aromatic, herbal kind of notes. If you like it classic, if you like your Fougeres to be classic, check out English Fern. It's quite awesome, in fact. A new discovery for me, and I quite like it. Another one from Penhaligon's, this is the third and final, and this is a very, very unique Fougere. I have some unique Fougeres here, and I'll point it out if it's a unique Fougere, whereas everything else we've smelled so far is typically Fougere. This one is going into a boozy territory. This is the Tragedy of Lord George. What an awesome looking bottle, as you can see. Really awesome. I love the horns. It's perfect something like this to display on a dresser or something like that. But wow, really, really interesting fragrance, because this one's very, very boozy, but in the heart notes, you've got shaving soap accord, which means basically they created a shaving soap accord with different notes, and that's what you get in the heart. So in the heart, you experience like a barbershop-y Fougere-like smell, which is really, really awesome. But you've got amber here, you've also got some boozy notes, as I was saying. So it's kind of like an oriental style of Fougere barbershop-y scent. Very, very unique scent. I love this one. It's It's very unique, and that bottle is to die for, as you can see. Stay tuned for a video comparing these three fragrances, and we're doing a giveaway as well, so you're gonna really, really enjoy that one. But that is The Tragedy of Lord George from Penhaligons. Next up, we're going to the House of YSL, and this is their classic Fougere, and this is, of course, Rive Gauche, this one right here. Now I cherish this one because it is discontinued, and this smells like a barbershop to me. Absolutely does, and it reminds me of Dad as well. This one is the intense version, I have them, and this is the Rive Gauche updated right here that I actually like as well. It's kind of similar, but if you want something very, very traditional, very classy, masculine, lavender heavy, you've also got some basil here. I think you also have some anise or licorice listed in here as well, and it's just really, really nice. Now when you check out the notes of this one, they have a fern note in there, which I'm assuming it's an accord to smell like what ferns are supposed to smell like, because ferns don't have a smell. I mean, at least that's listed on Fragrantica. I think it might be a mistake. I think a lot of people say that this doesn't smell alike, but I think they do have similarities. It's just this is weaker than this, which is a shame, but I'm cherishing these. And if you've ever tested the intense version with the original version, there's not a lot of difference, if any, which is a shame to me, but a great scent overall. Next up, we have a duo of fragrances from the Tom Ford house, two that were launched together that I haven't really spoken about here on this channel yet. We have Fougere d'Argent, this one right here, and then we also have Fougere Platine, this one right here. Now, out of the two, can you guess which one is my favorite? This is a question or a game I want to do here. I'm not going to tell you on this video, but I'll tell you in the video comparing these two in the future. But of the two, the Fougere d'Argent, this one right here, has lavender, woody notes, tonka bean, ginger, orange or mandarin orange, and then you've got labdanum. And with the Fougere Platine, you have very similar notes, but there are also green, licoricey, anise-like notes combined in them. So these are two different unique fragrances from the house of Tom Ford. In fact, I think there's a new release from this house that's also a Fougere. Now, I guess they're just focusing on Fougeres now that I have to check out still. But quality releases, Fougere d'Argent, Fougere Platine, if you like Fougeres. Tom Ford style Fougeres, definitely you've got the Tom Ford DNA and class written all over it. But again, let me know which one you think is my favorite. Put a comment down below. Next up, we're going to the house of Guerlain. This is Le Frenchy, this one right here. Not a lot of talk about this one, and I quite like this one because it's unique. It goes very, very classic to me, and it kind of also goes a little astringent with lots of like citric type notes. It kind of reminds me of classic fragrances. So you've got lemongrass, very green and astringent to me sometimes. You've got petitgrain, similarly bitter citrus leaves, and then you also have bergamot, lemon, lavender. You've got sage, vetiver, orange blossom, yuzu, ambergris, and tonka bean. So I love this one. It's actually really, really nice. And this is one of the fragrances I was going to feature in the addendum video I had done last summer that never aired. So that is Le Frenchy. Next up, we're going to one of my favorite niche houses, and this is their Fougere, an Oriental Fougere. It's L'Art de la Guerre, this one right here. An Oriental Fougere, I mentioned it earlier, a little earlier with another fragrance, but this one is Jovoy style of Fougere. It's got classy elements to it, but also it doesn't scream ultra masculine like other ones, which is actually very, very unisex appropriate. You've got immortelle, rhubarb, oak moss, leather, lavender, patchouli, nutmeg, violet, apple, bergamot, labdanum, and you've also got sandalwood. I don't see the tonka bean that's typically found in Fougeres, but this is definitely Fougere. But it is that Oriental style. It's warmer and a little more interesting rather than like a cool, crisp Fougere, if that makes sense. So that is L'Art de la Guerre from Jovoy. Next, we're going to a house called Le Galion, which I've spoken a lot about on this channel, and they have two Fougeres, two different, completely different Fougeres. One of them is called Special for Gentlemen. Absolute love for this one. It's a Fougere that is warm and cozy. Warm and cozy Fougere, this is awesome. So what we got here are big dominant lavender note, but you also have this like warm and gooey resinous note of a Papanax, which gives it that warm and oriental kind of touch, even though this is an aromatic fougere. You also have oak moss, you've got vanilla, there's another one that gives it an oriental touch, yuzu, you've got bergamot, and lots of really beautiful notes, cinnamon and things like that, and it's very, very unique for a fougere. It does have a very classic touch to it, so if those of you that are not into classic fragrances that might not like it, but if you have an advanced nose and appreciation for classic fragrances, you will definitely like this one. So this is Special for Gentlemen from Le Galion. Next up, another one from this house, and this is a fragrance that's called Vetiver, right here, Vetiver. Now this is a vetiver with fougere notes combined. Two of my favorite styles in one, if that makes sense. Again, it's very, very classic because this house is a classic house that was resurrected several years ago that used to be around in Paris. Their most famous fragrance is called Sortilège, I think, but this is vetiver. Very, very classic, but really, really good. So we have here bergamot as a dominant note. You've got coriander, vetiver, you've got tonka beans, you've got petitgrain, you've got lemongrass, sandalwood, and lavender. Just a really, really awesome release. Check it out if you don't know it. It's vetiver from Le Galion. Next, we're going to the house of Amouage, and a lot of people are not talking about this one or don't talk about this one, but I find it to be very, very classy. It's got a dominant clove note, which I love. So this is Bracken Man, and Bracken Man is Amouage's fougere. So you've got cloves, you've got cypress, patchouli, lavender, geranium, nutmeg, cedar, cinnamon, musk, lemon, bergamot, and sandalwood. No mention of once again, no mention of the tonka bean note, which is typically found in fougeres, but perhaps not all notes are listed everywhere, and totally smells like a barbershop scent. So that's Bracken Man. Now, this is a very, very unique fragrance from the house of Memo Paris, and I've reviewed this fragrance. This is called Russian Leather. It's mostly a leather, but what we have is an aromatic fougere leather. But it's a very, very cool, crisp fragrance wearing experience because it's very, very piney. You've got a big pine note along with the leather because leather is dominant here. Then you have all those aromatic fougere notes of lavender, mint, rosemary, cedar, sage, cypress, clary sage, tonka bean, anise accord, nutmeg, and things like that. But I love this one. This is a very, very underrated fragrance from this house, and one of the least popular, I think, at least to me. And probably this is one of the many, many leather fragrances that are inspired by Russia, I guess. A lot of Russian leather, Coeur de Russes and things like that. But this is a very unique one. Very masculine. If you don't know it, check it out. Russian Leather from Memo Paris. Next up, we're going to a house called Mirus Fine Fragrance, and I've reviewed this one. This is the Elysian Fields. Very small bottles here, 15 ml extrait de parfum bottles, and they're like around $60 or $70 for these bottles. Long lasting, but a very, very classy, potent, very elegant fougere. I think both a man and woman can wear this fougere, and I find the creation of this out of this world beautiful. It's so beautiful. Lavender, of course, is very dominant here, but you've got tonka bean and the typical fougere notes in here. So this is the Elysian Fields from Mirus Fine Fragrance. If you don't know it, check it out. Speaking of the Elysian Fields, I have one here from Roja Parfums called Elysium, this one right here. Now this is a very, very modern fougere to me. It's going into a territory of the Aventuses and Bleu de Chanels and things like that, but very ultra classy, ultra classy. A compliment getter. It's perfect. Like people stop and ask you what you're wearing because the smell that you leave, the trail you leave behind is out of this world kind of fragrance. I just love this one. Even though it's not anything groundbreaking or anything like, what the heck, or wow, what is that fragrance that I'm wearing? Typical of his other fragrances, this one actually garners so many compliments that it's just a great wearing experience. So this is Elysium from Roja Parfums. And speaking of Roja Parfums, we've got another one from this house called Scandal pour Homme. This one right here, which I reviewed late last year in December. And Scandal pour Homme is an amazing, like classy, really like classy, classically inspired or influenced fougere, but this one actually goes into the territory of a chypre to me, goes into smelling like a fragrance called YSL pour Homme, their very, very first fragrance for men, and kind of reminds me of it. I'm not saying it's exactly like that, but you do have the typical Fougere notes here, but it kind of goes into that Chypre kind of a territory, which is awesome. I love this one. Very, very classy. This is classic and classy. It's Scandal pour Homme from Roja Parfums. Next, we're going to the house of Rania J, and this is from the house that has the fragrance Ombre Lutte, which I'm a big fan of, but this is Lavande 44, typical aromatic, spicy aromatic Fougere fragrance, and you've got the lavender here, the big lavender dominant note, and you also have tonka bean in the base. You've got vetiver, patchouli, labdanum, petitgrain. It's a great, great fragrance. It smells like a Fougere, a barbershop fragrance come true, come alive. In fact, it's very, very 3D. It's got a lot of depth to it, and the intensity is really awesome as well. Lavande 44, amazing. Check it out if you don't know it. Next, we're going to the house of Nishane, and they do have a Fougere as well, and this is B612 or B612. This is an aromatic Fougere fragrance. It's very barbershop-y, but you have a very dominant note of cypress, cashmere wood. It's sexy. You've got patchouli, sandalwood. You've got lavender. Of course, we've got tonka bean, oak moss, and geranium, and woody notes. Really, really, it wears so classy. It's not overwhelming. It's not wimp either. Just a right balance of all the notes, and the experience is amazing. So that's Nishane's B612. And last but not least, we're going to end this list with Boy from Chanel. Chanel DNA all the way with this one, but you've got lavender, you've got tonka bean, you've got geranium. I find the geranium to be very amped up, and it's one classy wearing experience, but I don't find it to be ultra masculine. I find it to be very unisex, in fact. No, actually, I take that back. It's unisex, but it's slightly masculine leaning because it's got that geranium and the lavender and tonka bean. It makes it very, very more masculine than you know, feminine, if that makes sense. But a great release from this house. One of my favorites from this house. It's Boy, and it's from Chanel. There you have it. Those are my favorite Fougere fragrances, barbershop fragrances, guys. These are the Fougeres for 2019. Again, Fougeres are what ferns are supposed to smell like if they had a smell, or it's fern-like, or actually it means fern in French. And if you have any questions or comments, do let me know. Put some comments down. Let me know what you think of these fragrances as well. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you have something that I'm missing here? Please put a comment down. Let's get a conversation started. Otherwise, please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.